we've heard a lot recently about the fact that maybe the virus did start in a lab. Let's talk about that. The fact that there is this lab, I think it's the only one in the world quite like it, in Wuhan, where it started. It would almost be a conspiracy theory to think it didn't start in a lab.
You would think.
Right? And that theory was demonized at first, that, oh, it can't, that, come on, that's conspiracy thinking, that it would started in a lab. But it certainly is a 50-50, would you say that?
Oh, it's far more likely than that. As a matter of fact, I said, I think in June, that the chances that it came from the lab looked to me to be about 90%.
Okay.
So this was never a conspiracy theory. In fact, that term is simply used to make it go away. It's an obvious hypothesis that is in need of testing, and we are only now, a year in, getting to the point where we can discuss it out loud without being stigmatized.
Okay.
A big part of the problem, of course, is that we are so politicized, we're so polarized and partisan now as a country that if the wrong guy proposed this to begin with, and for half the country it was the wrong guy, then the rest of the country says, no way, no how, we're going to call that a conspiracy theory, and we're never going to revisit it. And the fact is that's not how science works. That is not science. You need to say, I've got a pattern, I'm going to make some observations, and I'm going to consider every possible explanation on the table. And did it leak from a lab? That was clearly from the beginning a possibility.
Okay.
Wow, am I the wrong guy? That was like episode 1. Not a conspiracy. There are no conspiracies, but there are also no coincidences. That's the Bill Maher show. I'm going to talk probably tomorrow, the next day, on the 1-year anniversary of my going out to the Bill Maher show to talk about pandemic, when they wanted me to talk about politics instead of the pandemic, and what I shared with the producers backstage and talked to them about it. This is the biggest event in modern world history. It's going to change the arc of history right now, and of course we've had nothing but a year of devastation. We're live. We're in the world.
And they didn't want to talk about it.
They wanted to talk about it. That's why I went out there. They wanted to, when I got out there, they changed their mind. They wanted to talk about the primaries and Bernie Sanders and all this other stuff.
If I remember correctly, wasn't that actually part of your agreement? You said, I don't want to go out.
Yeah, I don't want to. I just started a show here. So I don't want to schlep out there. To you guys had this show. I think I called in I came in from the hotel
on assignment.
On assignment. I don't want to do it unless we do it. But we'll get into more of that. But here's the point: we were right and they were wrong. And the bigger point is we haven't gotten to the bottom of it, of holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable. That's the key thing. We're at each other's throats. The economy, they're over there talking about $600 billion deals or $1.9 trillion deals, numbers that would not have been considered. Remember, when Obama put in his bailout plan for Wall Street in 2008, it was the end of the world, and it was $800 billion. You've got 10 senators walking over to the White House today to talk to him about a $600 billion, and it's like chump change. That's the down bid, right? The up bid is $1.9 trillion. Obama's entire bailout was $800 billion, and that time it was the end of the world. And interest rates have come down since then. So it's not like you've had massive inflation. This is ridiculous, and we have to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. This is the fecklessness and gutlessness of the entire political class. I want to go to Peter Navarro, bring in Dr. Peter Navarro in 2006, talked about this. But can we get that tweet up from Charlie Gasparino, the one that says that Peter Navarro is a moron? Peter, come in here. Peter, I think you got your master's and your PhD at Harvard. Your dissertation's at Harvard. You're a Harvard economist, correct? I'm just trying to get your bona fides, right? Charlie Gasparino from Pace University, a guy that 20 years into the business still doesn't have his own show. He's a roving correspondent. I think he's a roving correspondent for Fox Business, right? All the breaking news that Fox Business gives you. He's a roving correspondent, having been blown out of CNBC. He's just a rumor monger. Charlie Gasparino is a guy they tell rumors to just so he sprouts out crazy stuff, right? I don't want to say stocks trade on that. Far be it from me to say stocks would trade on that. But Charlie Gasparino is just a rumor monger, right? No heavy lifting. They've written a bunch of books. They're all trash, right? It's just a guy. He's the breaking news correspondent for Fox Business, which is always on the cutting edge of breaking business news, right? Neil Cavuto, one of the guy breaking business news. So tell me about Pace University's Charlie Gasparino says you're the dumbest economist in the world, sir.
If I may, Charlie Gasparino, the first among equals as a useful idiot for the hedge funds on Wall Street. And everybody knows on the street that when they want to spin some news into the marketplace to try to fleece the retail investors and maybe even some of the institutional investors, Charlie's the go-to guy. And during the China negotiations for several years, whenever the hedge fund money or the Chinese Communist Party needed a useful idiot to spin something so that the market would get more volatility, Charlie would be the go-to guy. So this isn't the first time he's called me a name. It won't be the last time, but I'll tell you this. The interview that you played in its entirety, where Charles Payne and Gasparino were going at each other with Cavuto in the middle, the two shameful things about that was, first of all, Charlie's behavior. I have never seen anybody act that rudely to a better gentleman and a smarter guy than in Charles Payne.
Yeah, Charles Payne's a good
Another
guy.
person who I thought was shameful in that was Cavuto, because Cavuto, it was his show. He was supposed to be the monitor. Here's the point. Whenever Gasparino talks, fade the news. Okay.
Right.
Because he's the guy who wanted you, Steve, to short Tesla for the last 3 years. Okay, think about that.
Right.
Short Tesla.
Hey, I want to go to. Let's go back. I want to go back to. I want to go back to China. Your book. You called it 14 years ago. There was going to be a pandemic coming out of here. You're actually, guy. I was so into the interview the other day. You contacted me Saturday and said, "Dude, you buried the lead on your interview with Quay." It was where he was Dr. Quay, who said, "Hey, the guy was telling you that the PLA." In running the lab was actually working on a vaccine in October of November when they first had the first victims come up. They were already working on a vaccine. This is what we talked about early in January, February about Wuhan being an overall lab controlled by the PLA. What say you, Dr. Peter Navarro?
This is why your show is so important right now, because that interview on Saturday with that guy, he ordinarily would not find an audience. He's the kind of guy, whether it's Dr. Yan or Dr. Quay or anybody else who has something to say that runs contrary to the anti-Trump mainstream media, won't have a voice. But heads around the world, Steve, should have exploded on that Saturday because of all the evidence that's made that this was indeed from a lab, likely genetically engineered. We don't know whether it was accidental or on purpose, but all the other stuff is adding up. When he said that they were in conjunction with developing that virus through gain function, they were simultaneously creating, it was like all the tumblers fell in place on the idea that this might have been an intentional act by the Chinese Communist Party, maybe directed initially.
I'll tell you what, we need another. Peter, we got to reconnect you. Let's cut it and reconnect him. I need Navarro here. I want to go to the concept, guys, of she said it's so. These are two very good people working on this program. The two folks were on Bill Maher the other night, and Bill Maher is a serious show. I know the people on the right hate him, but it's well produced and it's serious. About
that's why they hate him.
Yeah, it said if it had come from somebody else, then a certain guy that would be us, right? And reason that
It'll be you.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take credit.
Actually.
I'll take credit for that. But Dr. Quay, by the way, he came on Saturday for was a Bayesian analysis.
Yes.
This audience is the only audience in the world that can handle that. Listen to it, take notes, have live chat. That's why in the 77 days you're a co-starring role about how you have focused on the election fraud in the New York Times. And that's one of the things about CNN. You know, these shows, the Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo, Aaron, they're so dumb. I mean, it's just dumbed down. It's just so stupid. I don't know how you get through it. But Quay dropped that bomb in there. What about, they said it's because of the politicization. I think it's something different. They just don't want to hear anything as fact. Still, a year into this, and you know this from your intelligence work, they don't want to deal with CCP at all in this thing. They don't want to deal with the PLA. They don't want to deal with the absolute facts. And until we get over that, you're not going to have any solution for the world. You're going to go through more economic torment. Now they're saying the whole Biden administration rides on the 100 days with how he handles the vaccine and how he handles testing. And there's, we heard this morning from Dr. Maria. She's running the hospital in New Hampshire. There's 4 other strains. The one in the United Kingdom, Raheem, they're saying it may be much more contagious. They don't know if it's any deadlier. Then you still have people over here. They're saying, hey, I look at the math. It's all a hoax. I have nothing to worry about. Fauci's saying at first, no mask. Then he's saying you should wear 4 masks. And now he's saying, you don't have to wear any mask again, right? So is it politicization, or they just don't want to hear what other people have to say?
Well, it's politicization because they don't want to hear what other people have to say. The dividing lines in this country are often drawn between the haves and the have-nots, not the right versus the left. And the haves are the people who have been in bed with the Chinese Communist Party for so long. So there is a vested interest, millions upon billions upon billions of vested interest, actually. It's called the dollar, or rather not the dollar, right? That's the point here. And I'm just going through all of these websites now that have said conspiracy theory. And I'm going through all of the authors who have said conspiracy theory, because you heard it not on the War Room there. You heard it on Bill Maher right there. So let's hear from Marlo Stern at the Daily Beast. Let's hear from Amy Quinn, Vivian Yang, Danny Hakim at the New York Times. Let's hear from Don Lemon on CNN, and Rob Kuznia and Scott Bronstein and Drew Griffin and Kurt Devine. All these reporters who have gone on for the last year saying Bannon's pushed a wild conspiracy theory, should be kicked off the air. And of course, I want to hear from the all-important Madeleine Peltz on this one, who has referred to the very same thing over and over again. This is a conspiracy theory. You heard the phrase 90%. I don't even think you've gone to 90% on this before on this show. You heard on Bill Maher 90%. Has Madeleine Peltz drafted her blog post calling for Bill Maher to be taken off the air?
Madeleine, I want to tell you, Madeleine, head of marketing over at Media Matters for us for our show. I want to tell Madeleine, I got Raheem back in studio because you weren't quite comfortable with our afternoon interim co-host, Jack Posobiec. So that's why I brought. That's why
triggered.
I brought that.
Someone's a little triggered. Someone's a little triggered.
Madeline, Madeline got snarky. Jack Posobiec adds nothing, should be removed immediately. Right? It's something about you that rubs her the wrong way.
Many better have tried.
Jack, your take on this? I mean, this whole
look. When it comes down to it, it's anybody looking at this situation. They saw the lab, they saw the proximity, they knew this was the only place in the whole of the People's Republic of China where this type of research was going on. People are looking at it not from, by the way, a perspective of trying to ascribe blame, but just trying to understand what happened.
Yes.
Where did this come from? And they said, wait, why aren't we talking about this thing? And the more we learned about it, the more they covered it up, the more they took down the databases, the more they arrested and detained. The CCP has never been clean about this, and we know that something is going on in that lab that they don't want us to see.
You know we have a new theory now as well, right? You've heard about this one? It came from imported frozen food into Wuhan.
Yeah.
That's the latest one.
Trying to blame India now.
Of course,
but this is the conspiracy
CCTV
theory.
is playing as in Fort Detrick. But here's the thing. Also, anybody that knows anything about China, obviously people that consider themselves China hands, know that every facility like this is totally controlled by the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, and this is part of their overall bioweapons program. That is an open secret. It's not even a tough one to have to consider. Okay, short commercial break. We'll try to get Dr. Navarro. If not, we're going to go back to this New York Times article. We're going to return in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Axios has their lead story this morning is that nothing on the Trump trade deal with China worked at all. Zero, nothing. Okay, and they particularly call out Dr. Peter Navarro because he was the assistant to the president for trade. But as you brought up the other day, dealing with our economy, Atlantic lays out the entire long memo, the new
Atlantic Council.
Atlantic Council lays out the which is the home of the globalist, right? That's where they go between government gigs. They laid out the new geopolitical strategy of the Biden regime, and it was quite interesting. Unrestricted warfare without the information war and without the economic war. It's all kinetic, right?
Right. So they're calling for full-on kinetic war and then international diplomacy, international development with through the UN and going
Not
back
war,
to the
but
Peace
everything's
6+1
about military.
talks.
Everything's about the
right,
military.
It's military. We've got to increase our patrols. We've got to increase our submarine incursions into the second island chain, first island
This was
chain.
the great revolution of Donald Trump in America First. It was use information warfare and use economic warfare, and kinetic war is important, peace through strength, but we're not going to lead with our chin. Navarro, Axios, the running dogs for the corporate interest in Washington, D.C., Mike Allen, who's built really an empire over there. What say you about the lead story? That was aimed directly at your forehead.
You think? Look, the phase one skinny deal, the history on that is tawdry. What we had was a full deal that really would have killed China's 7 deadly sins,
Yep.
the intellectual property theft, the forced technology transfer, the currency manipulation. You know, we had the whole 9 yards and a handshake, a firm handshake deal. And the next thing we knew, they backed out of it and wanted to retrade it. And the result was this so-called skinny deal. And frankly, I'll be honest with you, I think Mnuchin got played with the promises that were made. Through leading into the election, we saw a huge amount, Steve, a huge amount of contracts being signed, but the product wasn't kind of leaving our docks to head to China. And
so, are you telling me? Look, my audience is already. The audience is already. The audience is already getting sleepy. What are you telling me that? Are you telling me that Axios is right in that the deal and the direction of the deal that you and Trump? By the way, the May 19 deal was magnificent. It was every vertical, or taking care of everything. It would incorporated China into really a free market system. Obviously, they rethought that and said, "Hey, upon further review, how about this? No, we're going to run away from it." Understanding that. Is Axios right? Is everything that you guys came up with afterwards didn't work?
Let me say this. Here's the most important thing I can tell you. Whatever Axios wrote, their conclusion is wrong. The conclusion is that you can't trust the communist Chinese, and you have to double down on everything Donald J. Trump did, including the tariffs, including holding them accountable for the deals and the promises they signed. The problem we had leading into the election is that there was a huge disconnect between what they said they were buying and what they were actually buying. Now, with respect to the trade deficit, Axios is wrong, but right for the wrong reasons. I mean, look, the trade deficit's going to go up because Donald Trump did a beautiful job of getting our economy unlocked faster than all the others. We grew faster than everybody, and what that did was suck in imports faster. So the trade deficit would go up. If we hadn't done what we had done with the tariffs, our trade deficit would be even much higher than it is today.
Okay, hang on.
It's a typical Axios globalist piece, but it really doesn't have the granularity or insight. The story behind the story was what you get on Bannon's War Room.
Okay, hang on for a second. So you've got, Posobiec's gone through the Atlantic Council, written by Anonymous, by the way. Written by Anonymous, this big piece. It talks about no, Victoria. No, I will never say that.
Who?
It talks about kinetic warfare, military strength, diplomacy, like we're back in the 19th century. Do you see right now any engagement on the confrontation with economic warfare by the Biden administration to confront the Chinese Communist Party, and particularly to confront it on the CCP virus that came out of the Wuhan lab? Compliments of Dr. Tony Fauci, who fully paid for and underwrote the gain-of-function experiments. Do you see it? Anything?
Absolutely not. You're not going to see it, not with the personnel they have in place. We got Jen Psaki in the drinking game every time she says strategic patience. That's a code word for appeasement. And throw another little cup of sake back down your throat and burn the hell out of your throat. So, no, I mean, look, this is a very, very serious fork in the road where we're at with communist China. I mean, We did our best to hold them accountable. We had a president who was the toughest in history, but we're going to see in Joe Biden that he is going to probably unwind everything we did using from people like Mike Allen at Axios and the Atlantic Council.
Okay.
So these are not good days, Steve. And, I get back to your Saturday story with Dr. Quay, where now we discover that in October, not only were scientists in a Wuhan lab who were funded by Dr. Fauci and who were given by permission by Dr. Fauci to do gain-of-function research, as they were genetically engineering a much more dangerous virus. At the same time, they were engineering a vaccine for their own people. Now, why would they do that? Well, I mean, look, there was Hong Kong that they were dealing with. I mean, maybe it was as simple of let's spread this to Hong Kong, put everybody in their apartment boxes, and we'll crush them. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. Now, they've also had, the Communist China has also seen that they were able to cripple the United States, and it looks like they took out
I want to connect. I want to connect some dots here. Hang on.
These are all intertwined roads that all lead back to Beijing. And the tragedy here is that the New York Times won't write stories about it. The Amazon Post won't. You won't see this on CNBC. You won't see it on the Sunday shows. But my God, Steve, this is the biggest scam in world history.
So Peter, hang on for a second.
All of this is correct. Communist China continues to have its way with the American economy.
Peter, can you see? Can we cut Peter back up?
I think there is an issue with him hearing us.
Yeah, there's one.
On the air, can't hear you.
Okay, fine.
He's not just talking over you.
No,
none of us would dare do that.
To cut it up and let it. Okay, I just want to show the New York Times today. It's got the global threat now that there's 9 different variants or 4 different variants eviscerating the world. Right, going around. That's below the fold. Above the fold, do I have Navarro back? You've got the 77 days. This connects the dots on President Trump. I want you guys to address, if we don't have Navarro, is that because we're throughout the story, at least this audience is. We have Navarro. Peter, so on the below the fold of the New York Times Day, you've got, there's more variants of this coming out, more lethal, more contagious throughout the world. In South Africa, I think 90% of the deaths are tied to this new variant. Now, but on the flip, you've got them spending, I think, 6 pages, 10,000 words. I think there's 4 or 5 Pulitzer Prize winners that write this thing: Maggie Haberman, Joe Becker, Jonathan Martin, Ruttenberg, all the killers writing this. And it's a piece that really set up, this is the Democratic argument for, he didn't really inspire it that day at the speech because we can't prove that because it was planned beforehand. But he did it for the 77 days from November 4th on. And essentially they say, I think 100 times in here, it's baseless, there's no evidence, and it's a big lie. And Donald Trump just went around and lied, and Rudy Giuliani and all these people. It's just nothing but lies. That you've got the 3-part report that you actually showed the evidence. Professor Clements has said, hey, he's read everything. 3,000 affidavits, 500 are evidence to be put in court tomorrow. What say you? You got about 2 minutes here. Walk through your report, and what are you doing with that? Because I think that's the best counter to the New York Times.
Steve, I want to ask everybody to go to Real P. Navarro on Twitter right now, because I've got a couple of tweets up there that really take the New York Times to task for a couple of things. First of all, the third paragraph of that story makes the argument that somehow these suitcases in Detroit that were supposed to be stuffed with fake ballots had camera equipment. But what they don't tell you is that the real story about suitcases was the one in Atlanta, which was never debunked, where you had enough fake ballots on video camera being counted multiple times just alone to sway that election. And second of all, Steve, I mean, how do you write a 10,000-word story about this whole issue and not mention the 3-volume Navarro report, which has been used both by the president himself and his legal team, basically to lay down the case that he had every right to believe that the election was stolen from him. So that story, it's interesting how the coordination between the mainstream media and the Democrats is continues, even as President Trump is down in Mar-a-Lago. It's like what the New York Times is doing is that they're basically a fluffer for the Democrat Party. They're getting ready for the Democrats to launch their 3 days of hell raining down on the president. And you and I both hope, Steve, that the legal team of the president will fight back against this Lindsey Graham conceit where just argue due process. No. The 3 volumes of the Navarro report show, first of all, widespread election irregularities across 7 states. Second of all, the conscious strategy by the Democrat Party to stuff the ballot box with absentee and mail-in ballots. And third, Steve, the report, which is titled Trump Won, shows the strategy of the Democrats across 7 states, count by count of the number of illegal ballots.
Peter, we got to bounce. We got to bounce to a hard break. We're gonna have the Navarro reports up. Peter back on tomorrow. We don't have the technical problems.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
GameStop, if you don't know, it's a video game store, and like a lot of businesses, they've been struggling because of COVID, but also because most people buy games online now. And yet, despite a sharp decline in sales, over the past 6 months, their stock price has grown by 8,000% because a bunch of amateur investors, maybe even some Russian disruptors who are part of a Reddit community called Wall Street Bets, decided to buy a bunch of GameStop stock.
That's Jimmy Kimmel. Now the GameStop populist rebellion is now a Russian. It's part of the Russian conspiracy. I can't even deal with this. I'll turn it over to Jack Posobiec.
Yeah, well, I have a question for Jimmy Kimmel. Is Chuck Schumer writing your monologues again, Jimmy? Remember this. Back when Obamacare, where they were talking about this and they were talking about all this stuff, it actually came out that Jimmy Kimmel was getting talking point help from Chuck Schumer's staff. So my question for you, Jimmy, the running dog of the hedge funds in all of this, is are you talking to Chuck Schumer's staff again? Did Chuck Schumer's staff ask you, the king, by the way, of insider trading in New York, did they ask you to call the Reddit guys a bunch of Russians? Right? Those guys are still in there on Reddit. You go to Wall Street Bets right now, you can see every single one of them are holding on with their diamond hands to GameStop. They're looking at AMC. They're not going to silver. CNN and all these guys, CNBC, are trying to say they're moving to silver. You go in and look, there's over 600,000 live on the Reddit with a total community of 8 million subscribers. They're saying we're not going anywhere. We're not moving into silver. We're holding on with our diamond hands. We're not letting go. GameStop, AMC, to the moon.
Okay, let's bring in Boris Ephshteyn now for a market check. Hey, Boris, today Charlie Gasparino, I think, gave an interview to Mediaite where he said he's sick and tired of hearing about the populist element of this, that this is overblown, it's too simplistic, that the Reddit army there, the 8 million that are in that, and 600,000 that are in the watching in the live chat right now on Reddit, are really not populist, that this is over simplistic. What do you say to Kimmel into Charlie Gasparino?
Steve, great to be with you and all the Patriots at the War Room. Jack Posobiec, of course, Raheem, and the MAGA Brain Trust, our viewers and listeners. In terms of Charlie Gasparino, I think his perspective is about as real as his Pulitzer Prize nomination. And we all know that was BS. So Charlie is obviously now part of the elite, part of the establishment, and he doesn't like what's going on when people take their agency into their own hands, their finances into their own hands, and it's very disappointing. In terms of Jimmy Kimmel, everybody knows Jimmy is a total clown, and if he's talking about Russian disruptors, maybe he's talking about me, because we came here when I was an 11-year-old chubby Jewish kid, and then was called a Russian spy, but by the Democrats and the brainiacs like Eric Swalwell, Jackie Spire, and others. So that's what we're dealing with these liberals like Jimmy Kimmel. What's really happening with the market is GameStop, which I still own, was down today over 30%. AMC was down, Nokia was down, BlackBerry was down. But again, as Jack just said, if you look at what's going on in the chat rooms, what's going on in Twitter, what's happening on Reddit is that there is a decision, there's a statement to continue to hold to the stock, and the stocks have moved. They were down significant double digits late last week, especially when Robinhood stopped trading in them, and then they were back up. So there's a continued hold here, which actually suggested this is not some short-term speculative move, but a decision by these investors, by these people who have the right to invest, to continue holding the stock. As to silver, very interesting. We did not see a significant move in silver, and silver is actually either flat or right about or down by a little bit for the last 30 days, including today's move. So a lot of that chatter over the weekend did not materialize. Interesting to know where it came from. Did it come from those who wanted a big move into silver, or were there really folks who were actually contemplating it? But as I shared with you over the weekend, Steve, a lot of that discussion about silver was really based on potentially holding physical silver, and as we realize, that is very hard to do. So that's what's going on with markets today. Very interesting start of the weeks, very interesting start of the month, but there is a decision to hold on Reddit, on Twitter, by the Wall Street Bets crowd.
Okay, I want to turn now to the trial of the century that's going to start next week, and I want to get to the legal team in a second, but I got to go back to this article of which the War Room plays a part in, and particularly this audience, because the audience is really what's important here. It's 10,000 words. I think 4 or 5 Pulitzer Prize winners are among the, I think, 7 or 8 people that wrote it. It goes
on. Charlie Gasparino one of them?
No, Charlie Gasparino is not. But they go on and on. It's page 1. It goes on forever. I think it's 6 pages internally to the Times. They go chapter and verse about why this is a big lie, why this is all phony. Everywhere from Paxton in Texas had his brief written by the White House, to everything that you guys did on the legal side was all either incompetent, amateurish, or just are illegal. But they never address any of the facts. They never take on any of the particular facts in Wisconsin, the ICs, the early voting. They don't take on any of the situation in Georgia, never address anything in Arizona. So what's your sense? And this is obviously laying the groundwork. This is the research department for the Democratic, the prosecution, right? Because the prosecution is going to hit Trump from 2 angles. One is going to be a very emotional that Jamie Raskin put together, and I'm sure it's got videos and all types of things about President Trump riling people up in the past. But understanding they can't make that case to directly connect the speech and the rally to the incident, because the incident had started, I think, some of it even before people were up there, even before he took the stage. That they've got to go back, and now they got to set the predicate November 4th for 77 days, and the New York Times does that. How would you, being as you were there for all of it, and knowing that you know the facts, how would you counter that?
Steve, I'll tell you this. Whenever the New York Times puts out one of these Old Testament combined with New Testament sized articles, stories, honestly, I largely ignore it. It's what happened with the president's taxes, when the New York Times apparently stole a version of the president's early tax returns and try to somehow put it together with other information that they did not get legally. It was total nonsense and nobody cared. I think this is the same thing. This is the New York Times putting out the Democrats' perspective that there was no voter fraud, and it's not an honest perspective. The Democrats know there was voter fraud in Wisconsin. You just mentioned the indefinitely confined votes, the mail-in absentee ballots, which did not have signatures on them. Overall, over 200,000 unlawful ballots in Wisconsin, over 400,000 allegedly unlawful ballots in Georgia. Of course, they're not going to talk about that. They're going to try to piece together a lot of these, smoke and mirrors connections, and how this was a big conspiracy. All this was an insistence by President Trump and his team, which I'm proud to have been a part of, that we need election integrity in this country, and that we have laws in this country. We have a constitution in this country with mandates under Article 2 that it is state legislatures which determine how elections are held for president. And the New York Times wants to put together a bunch of this nonsense. Let them. Maybe some of their readership will be interested. I predict that article will, if it's not now, will soon be not behind a paywall, because I'll be begging somebody to read that whole thing.
Now, Boris, I want to jump in here right now with some numbers on this to give people a perspective. Some numbers out of the heartland that just came out today on Message Inc. This is Josh Hawley talking about the state of Missouri, right? So right in the heartland, really known as that sort of battle space, that battleground for the country. For likely voters, do you agree that Josh Hawley was within his constitutional duty to object to the Pennsylvania results? 57% of likely voters agree, including 47% strongly agree. And that's 61% with independents.
Wow.
Now,
How much with independents?
61%. That's the heartland. Now,
You mean you add? Okay, good. Got it.
let's go down to the actual impeachment question.
Yep.
Do you favor or oppose? 58% oppose the impeachment, state of Missouri, including 54% strongly oppose. With independents, 61% of independents in the state of Missouri oppose
61% independents, or when you add it up, it's 61%?
61% of independents.
Good Lord. Okay.
And with Republicans, it's 91%.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is
with Democrats,
this
it's
is why we
9%.
continue to do this. Hang on for a second, Boris. This is why we continue to pound this. Raheem, I want to get you first. Daily Mail is breaking a story that the president's new team, Schoen, who I think is the lead lawyer of the two, I don't know, but it looks like he's the lead lawyer. Schoen just announced he's not going to argue anything about election fraud. He's just going to go back to the constitutional issues of due process. Mr. Raheem Kassam.
Then don't go. No, then don't show up. I mean, the constitutional things are obvious to everyone anyway, and they've shown they've already got those votes, right? There's already enough people who don't believe in this whole process, so don't bother. If you're not going to use the opportunity as an opportunity and rather just another reason to be on the defensive again, then don't go. Just empty chair it, let them have their little moment, because it's not going to change anything. What the public wants here, what the base wants here, is for finally us to have our say. Remember, the New York Times, in its mini novella, right, that it puts out, says after every single court thing that was heard, it was a failure. There weren't court trials about this thing. That's why you didn't get. And here's the thing. You want to talk about why the country's divided? You want to talk why there's so much pent-up anger and aggression? You want to talk about why, for instance, you have somebody going up on Bill Maher saying, hey, it's too politicized. We can't even get to the origin of a virus that is attacking our people? It's because we aren't allowed our day in court. So for the president's lawyers who are saying we're not going to argue the merits, we're not going to argue the evidence, we're not going to argue the case, you are not just a part of the problem here. You are complicit in the problem here.
Boris, we got about 2 minutes. I want to turn to you. Is the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is he the best guy to go up there, go in the well of the Senate, and make the opening 2 or 3 hour argument of overall the architecture of his victory, of what really happened and how this was stolen from him?
First of all, Steve, I'd like to make you an offer. I will give you the same amount that I've invested in the 4 stocks, GameStop, AMC, BlackBerry, Nokia, if you wear a jacket of the same design that Raheem is wearing today. I think you'd look great in it. So just something to think about during the break and between today and tomorrow. In terms of the president, yes, I absolutely believe the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, the 45th president, is the one who is best to carry this out, who is best to make this presentation, and frankly, who will actually break through. We know the media is not going to want to cover any presentation on voter fraud, any presentation on election fraud, any presentation on dead people voting in Nevada and Georgia and illegal immigrants voting in Arizona. But if it's Donald Trump up there, they sure as well are going to be forced to do so. Now, is that going to happen? It doesn't seem that way to me based on everything that I'm hearing and everything you're seeing out of the new now legal team. I believe that the arguments have to be on 3 vectors. The unconstitutionality of the process. Yes, it's unconstitutional to have this sham of an impeachment trial. The fact the president in no way incited this, said peacefully and patriotically march. As you mentioned, Steve, the timing just doesn't line up. This was not incited. And then absolutely C, the deep election fraud, deep voter fraud that Americans believe happened in the 2020 election. The numbers that Jack pointed out, the 81% of Republicans who know that this election was stolen. We need to get that information. We need to get those facts out there because that is what, as Raheem said, the base requires. And what is the base? It's not something political. It's the lifeblood of the Republican Party.
Boris, real quick.
Lifeblood of the country.
Boris, real quickly, what's your social media coordinates? We got to pop. You got about 15 seconds.
Thanks so much. At Boris EP on Twitter, Boris_Epshteyn on Instagram, at Boris EP on Twitter, Boris_EPSHTEYN on Instagram. Stay strong. God bless. See you tomorrow.
Boris Ephshteyn. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to come back with Raheem and Jack, and I want to walk back through those numbers coming out of Missouri in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Schoen has already said, he's out today, Daily Mail's got it, he's out today saying, hey, I'm the new lawyer, but I'm not arguing, I'm going to argue due process, right? And I'm not going to go to the forbidden words, election fraud. You know Castor, right?
Yeah, look, Bruce Castor was the Montgomery County DA for 8 years back. That's where I'm from originally, just outside Philadelphia. He was the county commissioner. By the way, county commissioner who served alongside Josh Shapiro, who at the time was a Montgomery County commissioner. Now, of course, Josh Shapiro is the AG.
Is that President Josh Shapiro?
Yeah, President Josh Shapiro, so they used to duke it out at the commission level there in Montgomery County. And so Castor, look, he's a guy who, he is a top-notch lawyer. He's the kind of guy where if he's going to court, he does not like to lose. If he signs on to something, he knows he's on the winning side. He's going to go into it, right? There was been a lot, and we're going to address this, right?
Yeah.
People say, why didn't he prosecute Cosby back in the mid-2000s? Why did he pass on that and go later? It was because he didn't have the evidence lined up at the time, and he thought that it would get an NG, then Cosby would get double jeopardy.
This is not so much about the lawyers per se as about the strategy. And the two dots I want to connect is the Josh Hawley numbers that come out to show that people want a fight here and want to know, they think this is illegitimate, and what happens to Cheney on Wednesday. What's happening in Wyoming and what's happening to Cheney with his leadership vote on Wednesday, because all the buried leads in the stories about the Senate get down to Cheney. They're eyeballing Cheney to see how they're going to be taken out. They're telling Trump and the people around Trump right now, if you so much as mention anything, because the New York Times has just told us officially, the New York Times has said it's all a lie. Now it's official in the paper of record, right? It's one thing on CNN, MSNBC. The New York Times has now told us it's all a lie. If you so much as mention election fraud, voter fraud, ballot fraud at all, you will be convicted. Do you think that's a bluff, Mr. Raheem Kassam? Would you call that bluff?
Oh, I would call the bluff all day long. But here's my question. Why can't we have somebody like Phil Klein, for instance? I mean, a genuine question. Why can't we have somebody like Phil Klein? I'll tell you, when he gave that presentation, it was a couple of weeks ago now, he gave that presentation. He was up there for like 90 minutes.
He's over there in Arlington. I was there.
Man, I got religion from watching that guy. Right? He was up there
mesmerizing,
like a preacher at the pulpit.
Yep.
And he could take you from the evidence to the Constitution, to the philosophy, to the everything. You know what? Democratic senators and Republican senators alike would be left with their jaws on the floor if you had somebody like Klein up there riffing for hours about this
We were
thing.
told this again and again, by the way, when they were having the traveling roadshow, and some of the hearings that they held were not actually in public. Ones were actually held in private, one-on-ones or with small groups with state senators and state reps, and they would take their glasses off and they'd rub them and they'd say, I had no idea it was like that. They had never had anyone sit there and walk them through the facts and the evidence.
By the way, that 57%, I think Trump won 57-41 to Missouri. I would call Blunt's bluff. I would sit there for these senators. I call your bluff. I would dare you. This is the power of the National Pulse piece by the one and only Steve Cortez. He said, hey, how about this? Why don't we put the Senate on trial, right? They're the ones that should be in trial, and these numbers reinforce it. The key about the 85%, which is missing in the New York Times piece, 85% of Republicans, they are people that have actually had access to this information, and when they see it, they go, hey, it's either illegitimate or illegal. This thing's got to be vetted. It has to be vetted. It must be vetted.
There are only two data points you need to understand why the bluff needs to be called. The first is Donald Trump's approval numbers. The second is the United States Congress's approval numbers. Call their bluff.
And the gap in between.
And I think we're kind of talking.
You're saying the mid to high 40s, or even 51% trailing if you talk the Rasmussen poll, versus the anywhere from the 9% to the 19 or 20%, somewhere in between.
What I'm saying is the country is preternaturally inclined to support President Trump and support the idea of him having his say that day.
Do we have enough time to play the Ted Cruz thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's run it.
Let's run Ted Cruz.
Let's roll it.
The media narrative that doesn't exist and you can't say it exists it is weird rewriting history.
Yeah.
Now, listen, on the other hand, President Trump's rhetoric, I think, went way too far over the line. I think it was both reckless and irresponsible because he said repeatedly, and he said over and over again, he won by a landslide. There was massive fraud. It was all stolen everywhere. That evidence, the campaign did not prove that in any court.
Right.
And to make a determination about an election, it has to be based on the evidence. And so simply saying the result you want, that's not responsible. And you've never heard me use language like that.
Right.
What I've said is voter fraud is real, and we need to examine the evidence and look at the actual facts. And in particular, what is the evidence of how much voter fraud occurred, and did it occur in sufficient quantities and in...
Yeah, but okay. So, and that was supposed to be the day
Ted,
of
wipe the salt off your shoulder.
January 6th. By the way, Ted's got the look now. I'm digging the beard and the whole look. And by the way, he's on page one in my green combat jacket right there. He's there he is right there. His Steve Bannon impersonation with his Ray-Bans on.
I've noticed whenever he's got the beard, you don't, and whenever you've got the beard, he.
I know.
But let me jump in here.
You never seen us in the same room as each other either.
What this is. This impeachment of Trump is actually more important than the first impeachment. Second impeachment is more important than the first impeachment.
Wow.
Because this impeachment is actually a proxy war for the soul of the Republican Party and the direction of our country going forward. Now, Ted Cruz, through his virtue signaling, he's sending a message about what side he's on. He's saying, hey, I'm with the establishment. I want to cut.
You think
and
he's
run.
saying that? That's what he's saying?
He's sending
cutting
a
and
message.
running?
He's saying, please don't hurt me
Please
anymore.
don't hurt
Please.
me. Look, I was there, but I'm with you guys at the end of the day. And
So Toomey of the Sedition Caucus or Treason Caucus, you think he's punched out?
Oh, he's got under his skin. He's bucking. He's bucking and saying, "Oh no. I know I may have objected to Arizona. I know I may have called
What's
for
the
this."
interviewer's name there? Michael.
That's Michael Knowles.
Michael Knowles. What's he doing? Going, yep, that's right. Yep. No, hold on a minute. Push back. Hold on. If you think that there wasn't enough presented, why did you go to bat for him? He just gives him an easy interview. Ted Cruz, come on the National Pulse podcast.
Okay,
I'll give you a real interview.
Tell us about the podcast.
Yeah,
Quickly.
brand new podcast. We're on the second episode. Just rolled it today, covering in depth a lot of the stories that you're hearing about. Make sure you go to thenationalpulse.com/podcast.
What's your social media coordinates?
Raheem Kassam.
Okay,
on everything.
and what are you, Jack?
Posobiec.
You can get us. By the way, we have 400,000 people signed up on Rumble right now. So saying, okay, go to warroom.org/join. You get the newsletter, you get the show notes, you get it all for free. Okay, be back tomorrow at 10 a.m.